Fortuitously, this is our usual game of two halves. For the first half, you can be a lean-back audience. I've got a fantastic panel for you, a really well-informed panel. And this is a provocative subject. It's interesting, when we did the first mail-out to our members, and we're doing this, I got an avalanche of negative emails. It's great, we just didn't invite them. They're not here. You've been carefully selected to add to the quality of an evening. We're filming this broadcast quality. We're streaming right across Africa, live, in the right time zone. So we're going down from Morocco right down to South Africa. We're going to film it and edit the highlights. So you might be edited in, or you might be edited out. And the quality of the question and the quality of the response is everything. But on a serious note, this is a really serious subject for us. It's more than about South Africa. It's more than about Africa. It's about leadership. And I don't care what the issue is, the solution is always found somewhere in leadership. But this is one we can have a real hearty look at. South Africa provokes. It always provokes. Sometimes the cynics climb into it, and sometimes we get the optimists. The recent change in the president of South Africa, is this a cause for optimism, or should we still be guarded and cautious? And with that, Zach, give our introductory video, please.
The people they serve. I have therefore come to the decision to resign as President of the Republic with immediate effect.
Schedule 3 to the Constitution, I declare the Honorable Pumela Salela duly elected President of the Republic of South Africa.
After weeks of diplomacy, the man dubbed the Great Negotiator replaces Jacob Zuma as South Africa's leader. Cyril Ramaphosa now with a major job on his hands, restoring prosperity to a nation divided by race, inequality and mistrust in government.
I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society.
Goal, Bafana, Bafana! Goal for South Africa!
With a population that has outgrown basic infrastructure, economic growth has slowed. Government is now desperately trying to catch up, spending trillions, laying down new foundations over the next 15 years.
Infrastructure is the catalyst that can change this country.
Spending on infrastructure amounted to 1 trillion rands over the past 5 years.
But even with sound infrastructure, none of this is possible if we don't fix education first. Not all pupils have access to textbooks, libraries, and well-educated teachers. Many still make do without a roof over their heads. Introducing minimum norms and standards for schools, government aims to eradicate mud schools in the next 3 years. The promise is that equal education will be the driver for social change and innovation.
I see a hunger in young people for learning, for skills development. They flood the universities in January, wanting to get entry. That's a great thing. Our job now is to make sure there's enough universities and that they can come out there with a good degree, with a good skill, with something that can provide for them and their families.
They will provide for the state too. A growing middle class means more taxpayers whose money will maintain future infrastructure and help fuel government's big dreams. But when there are mega projects, corruption often rears its ugly head. Infrastructural graft is already costing government up to 30 billion rand a year. Coming with it, mounting pressure on government to deliver.
2012 was a bruising year for South Africa.
The country's poor are running out of patience and are tired of broken promises. Many are still waiting for basic services that will help restore dignity to their everyday lives. South Africa will struggle to build the future and unite the nation if the odds are stacked against children like Pumela yet to take her first steps.
Up there. Please give a warm welcome to our panel, and I will give them the chance to introduce themselves. But first of all, Pumela, come and join us. Give a big round of applause, please, Pumela. Graham. Sharon. And John. Thank you very much, please. So just to set this off, we've got a nice, mixed, diverse panel. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves and what they do. Quickly. I'll do first, Pumela. What do you do?
Thank you very much and good evening to everyone here. Thank you for the gift of your time, for joining us as we speak about our beloved country, South Africa. My name is Pumela Salela and I'm the country head for Brand South Africa here in the UK. And our role is mainly to position South Africa as a globally competitive market, as a globally competitive nation, and in all the sectors of the economy. We are also here to encourage collaboration between the United Kingdom and South Africa, and to mobilize those of you who are South African to play your part in terms of giving back to the country. Thank you.
Fabulous. Graham.
I'm Graham Boynton. I'm a journalist of far too many years standing. I grew up in Zimbabwe, which is why I believe I've earned my pessimism. I've worked here and in the US and all over the world, but I cover Africa quite frequently in various guises. So I kind of think I vaguely know what's going on, but nobody really does. And yeah, as I said, I'm a little bit, I think that I'm the pessimist on the panel, and I am. Sorry.
Thanks
for the avoidance of doubt. Sharon.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sharon Constanson. I have 3 lives. I am a corporate governance specialist. I'm a foreign exchange advisor. And tonight I'm in the capacity here as chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce in the UK. We are, as the chamber, building the ability for us as a chamber to sit between UK and its Brexit problems and South Africa and its desire for trade. And we're sitting in the ideal position to actually do something about helping both countries achieve their objectives. I wouldn't say I am I don't see a rosy future. I'm probably a pragmatist if I had to compare myself against
Passionate skeptic.
So I've got an optimist, a pessimist, a pragmatist, and John.
So John, I don't know what box you're going to put me in. Good evening. My name is John Battersby. Like Graham, I have been a journalist and a correspondent for a lot of my life, but not for the last 15 or so years. I was the predecessor of Pumela Salela at Brand South Africa. I'm a director of the South African Chamber that Sharon is the chair of. I'm the trustee of an educational charity. And since I left Brand South Africa 3 years ago, I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades. I do a lot of different things. The one golden thread through my life has been South Africa. I naturalized as a South African. I was born in the UK. I left when I was 3 months old because my mother couldn't handle the weather here. She was South African, my father was British. So as a naturalized South African, I found that being born a citizen of a country is very different from taking the conscious decision of becoming a citizen of a country. So my South African citizenship has always been kind of uppermost, although I've now been living here for the last 12 years, in fact. I have been involved with the interface between Britain and South Africa for the last 35 years in various capacities, as a journalist, as a advocate through the country manager, and now in various different guises, including one of my roles is on the Mandela Centenary Committee.
Very nice. So we've got a nice broad spread. But Pumela, I'm going to come to you first, because I want you to really set my positive agenda that gives us something to talk about.
Okay. I think we are meeting at a time when in South Africa we are talking about a new dawn, which brings us new hope as a country, which brings new hope to the investment community globally, that indeed South Africa is on a new page, if I may put it that way. We are meeting at a time when we've just had the Commonwealth Heads of Agreement, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting here in the United Kingdom, where our president met with the Prime Minister, Theresa May, and the Prime Minister pledged about £50 million to be able to help South Africa in terms of trade, investment, as we know that the United Kingdom is the biggest investor in South Africa. So that's the first one, and I'll mention three very quickly. The second one is that on the 16th of April, the President of South Africa launched an investment drive, and this drive is about ensuring that South Africa is on the map as a country of opportunities when it comes to investments. And he has appointed 4 investment envoys to go out in the world and look for tangible projects that can be invested into South Africa. And this will culminate in an investment conference which will be held between August and September this year, where everyone is invited, both domestically within South Africa and internationally. And on a third point, the president on the 27th of March launched a scheme that is called Youth Employment Services Scheme, in short, YES, which is about addressing this problem that we have with youth unemployment by ensuring that young people are, one, incubated within companies, and that they are being given the ability to grow their micro enterprises within the incubation of a company, and the necessary work experiences through internships. And the government of South Africa will then give every private sector incentives for being able to house these young people within their organizations. Let me stop at that.
That's a great opening.
Be like, oh, this should
No. This is a nice. I was hoping you'd get Graham to unfold his arms, but we failed a little bit there. So, Graham, why don't I come to you next?
Well, that's Pumela. You've painted a very, very pretty picture, and it sounds all very encouraging. However, yeah. I think that the numbers, just look at the basic numbers, are the things that are working against South Africa.
Okay.
So we've got a population growth that's dramatic. We're from 1970, I think the population was 25. It's 54 million now. In 2050, it'll be 75 million. So, as with the whole of Africa, and Africa, I think the population explosion in Africa is really one of the frightening numbers for the century. You're probably aware, 1.2 billion today, double to 2.4 billion in 2050, and double again to 4.8 billion by the end of the century. I mean, these are terrifying numbers because Africa's struggling to feed the existing population. Quadruple it, and how is this going to work? So I think that that's one of the issues. If you've got, I think it's estimated that to take in the 26 million young people into the economy over the next 25 years, to accommodate them and to maintain standards, the economy has to grow at 6% a year. It's currently, last year it was 1.3%. This year it's estimated to be a bit better at 1.8. So as every year goes by, the shortfall becomes greater. The problems become more entrenched. And you've now got a very, very militant a group of dispossessed people represented by one of the sort of wealthiest young men in South Africa, Julius Malema, but however he's representing the dispossessed, and these guys are sending out really quite dangerous messages. And if you get to a tipping point where these people haven't had any satisfaction from the economy, from a government that they see as corrupt, and also very wealthy, that you've got a problem coming down the road. Now, I am not a gleeful predictor of gloom in any way, shape or form. I love Africa. I love Southern Africa. I'm Zimbabwean. I love that country more than anywhere. And it breaks my heart to see what's happened to Zim. And I think that South Africa is in the same kind of ballpark.
Before I come back to you to find out what you suggest needs to change, let me come to Sharon first.
Good idea.
Being the practical person, from what I see from what Pumela was saying and what I see Cyril Ramaphosa bringing to the country, and what it could have been if it hadn't been him, your statistics would be no different. The fact is that South Africa is dealing with these challenges of people, of corruption, of bankrupt municipalities. All those challenges are there today.
And underperforming business.
Underperforming business, the economy is in the worst it's ever been. It's been raped and pillaged as a country. That is a fact that we're dealing with now, whether we had got Mrs. Zuma in or whether we had got Cyril Ramaphosa in. So therefore, I take it from a practical point of view is we've got the best we could possibly have got out of where we were, which is actually at the bottom. We've had we are given as a country the opportunity to pull itself out of where it was. And this is it's not just the silver lining on a thundercloud. I think it's a bit more than, I think it's a dawn, as you were referring to it earlier. So I see Cyril Ramaphosa as being the best opportunity today to deal with the fact that we've got a mess. There is a mess in the country and there's a lot to be done. And I think it's for business globally to actually put their money into what is an emerging economy, a country that's got a volatile currency. That's my day job. I understand how difficult that is to deal with a lot of regulatory environment. But if you want to make money, that is one place you can go at the moment. So for an investment community to go into South Africa and you do it properly, that you can actually make a fair amount of money. But at the same time, you are actually giving the opportunity to the local people. You are growing the economy. The country can do that 6%. That is possible. But you've got to take in what Cyril Ramaphosa wants, which is 1.3 trillion rands into the country. I was trying to work on my calculator, what they worked out in sterling. My calculator won't do it. And I couldn't get to Excel quickly enough before I got here to work
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot
It's
of
a
money.
lot of money.
A huge amount of money.
$1 billion.
Yeah, so it's a very, very large amount that has to
100 billion.
get invested into the country. And it has to work for both parties. And therefore, I believe there's a lot from a practical point of view. People will go in from a business point of view. It'll start to turn the corner of what is wrong, create the employment, get the money into the economy, but at the same time, they're going to get what they want, is a better return on investment than they get anywhere else in the world.
John.
Yeah. Last night I was challenged. I was speaking to a friend of mine in the House of Lords, Lord Boating. He used to be way out on the left of the Labour Party, and he's now established
He used to be ambassador for South
business.
Africa.
He was ambassador in South Africa, yeah. And he's always, I've shared platforms in him in the past when I was doing the job Pumela does now. And what I noticed about him, he was always optimistic. And I thought, is this just the way he was born, or does he use this as a strategy? So I said to him last night, we came very close, didn't we, Paul, given the Zuma era and the 197 votes that got Ramaphosa into the presidency. And he looked, he said, yeah, and we chatted on, and I said, you don't agree with what I'm saying? He said, John, I have always been optimistic. And I said, yes, you have. Where does that optimism come from? And he says, it comes from my belief in the institutions and the fact that the institutions have prevailed. And that's the big difference between what's happened in South Africa and what's happened in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, it took the military to get rid of a old leader way past his sell-by date. And in South Africa, we did it through our own internal mechanisms in our democracy. And I think that really is the hope for South Africa. Is it going to be a smooth ride from here going forward? Never. It's going to be a very difficult ride, and it's going to be a lot of bumps and a lot of ups and downs. But I agree with what has already been said, that if there's one person, the best person to do it is without doubt Cyril Ramaphosa. He's an established businessman. I mean, I was covering South Africa for the New York Times at the time when the miners' strike took place, and you know, he won. Well, I mean, he was instrumental in speeding the end of apartheid because he managed to mobilize the trade unions, and he won huge respect from the business community because they saw what a great negotiator he was. So, you know, what I've also realized about South Africa, having been involved in this kind of space for a very long time, it's a long-term project. Mandela had a long-term vision. And, you know, you have a vision, you have a project, you get very excited, you have euphoria, now you've got Ramaphoria, which is great. But you've then got to get on with the reality of fixing, you know, a lot of stuff from the past.
So look, Graham was very clear about some of the challenges, some of the numbers, from the population, from the growth rates necessary, from some of the issues around graft corruption and failing infrastructure. But John also pointed out some of the strengths. Tell me more about what has South Africa got going for it. You mentioned institutions, but there's more than that.
There's more than that. There's a tremendous energy in South Africa. I've been living here now for 12, 13 years, and sitting reading the news and reading the headlines, I can get pretty depressed about South Africa. I go back there, and I always leave feeling much more energized and much more optimistic, because there is, you know, this
good South African wine.
Well, there's good South African wine, yes.
Sunshine.
There's good South African wine. There's sunshine. There's beaches. There's mountains. All of those things. But there is this tremendous energy, and there's a tremendous resilience of the people. South Africa is really about, any country is about the people, but in South Africa, it really is about the people. You know, it's dangerous to send people to South Africa if they haven't been there before, because they're going to want to go back. You know, it was one of the lines that we could always use. So,
so Sharon, from where you sit, where do you see the positives? What's going for South Africa? You said that 6% could be done.
Mm-hmm. I think what's positive is, going back to the word you were talking about earlier, was the institutions. But also you have got civil society, which has actually mobilized for the first time, in my knowledge. As you have globally, if things are going well, people who believe in it just become a bit apathetic and don't actually get energized and mobilized. And I think what happened in South Africa in the last sort of 3 years is everybody got energized, everybody got mobilized into the fact that things had to change. So I think that energy is still there. They've actually mobilized things, and I think business and people want to now see a difference. But also behind that, you have got a leader, a major leader, whose people can respect for his commercial capability. He's not going to run the country purely on a political ground. He'll run it on a commercial ground. He's going to have more challenges than I wouldn't want his job in a million years. It's going to be a really tough one. But you also have a very good judicial society. You have the sunshine, you have the energy. And I think we have what we talk about as the 11th province, I think it is. All of us here, 10th. Outside, it's the 10th province, sorry, my apologies. Gosh, I don't know my geography. I left school. I left school too long ago. You have that energy, that ability to take our skills back to the country, to support it, to look after those that come out from the country to here, and actually share that message into this community. I have to say with John, to agree, you come into one of those airports, doesn't matter which airport you land at, and everybody smiles at you. And you think, wow, where's that crime? Where's that corruption? I don't see, I just see everybody smiling. These big teeth, white teeth, and that beautiful part of it. There's that invisible part that I think Cyril Ramaphosa has to deal with over and above everything else. But yes, there's the energy there.
Very good. Graham, we had a little chat earlier on about media. Is media a strength in South Africa?
Oh, I think so. I should fill in a bit about
Please.
The conversation suggested that that the South African media were negative and overcritical. I actually don't find that. I think that it's a very, very vigorous media, and it's one of the institutions And by the way, I am a pessimist, but I don't want to be. And I agree with both of my colleagues on the left here, that you go there and you come back and you're full of energy. You take that on. It is fabulous. That's why everyone keeps going back. My pessimism is reluctant, I can assure you. But the media, I think, play a very, very important role in, and have done. I mean, they wouldn't let Zuma go. I get there must be a book of Zapiro cartoons that feature only the president of the time, Zuma. He was brilliant. I think the media is really good and very important, and it's something that I was involved. I was deported from South Africa in the mid-70s. Because it was very easy to get deported.
Come on, you're not going to get away with that.
No,
what did you do? What did you do?
I was an activist journalist, so all of my friends were banned. And we talk about institutions here. The Constitution, which I'm very proud to say some of my old colleagues and struggle friends helped write, is a masterpiece. And that's also part of South Africa's salvation. So as you can see, I'm now swinging quite dramatically to the optimistic side. But the media is the same as it was in the apartheid days, I must say. I think that we were good. There was always an English language press that was anti-apartheid and anti-government, and we fought very hard, and we were up against it a lot of the times. I was actually relieved to be deported, because I'd spent 2 or 3 years with my telephone tapped, special branch following me everywhere I went, and eventually it became a pain in the ass. And it was so nice to come to a democratic country where you could stand on a soapbox, shout your mouth off, and no one listened to you. So the media is very, very important, and I mean there's another side to that in South Africa. There is a state media that SABC, one could argue, isn't actually up to speed. But I think that generally the papers, the press, the independent press are very, very good and have helped bring Zuma down, I would say.
Pumela, so we've heard there is cause for hope. There's reason for hope. The institutions, civil society, and independent media all stayed quite resilient, robust, and secure, no matter how tough things got. But Graham makes a great point about the numbers. Population exploding. Youth unemployment's going to be an issue that's not going to go away. Education's challenging. Health systems are at the limit. What's your view?
Okay. From a population growth point of view, particularly the so-called youth bulge, firstly, that's indicative, as you've rightly said, Graham, of the growth across Africa, something that's happening across the continent. But let's balance it with the fact that we have an aging population, for example, in Europe. I'll make one example of a country that is having an aging population and is a keen investor in South Africa, and that's Germany. Germany says we don't have workers. Our population consists of adults who are not in the working age group. Therefore, Germany is investing a lot in South Africa so that they can have that population that can form part of the workforce. And then balance that with the fact that if you look at the State of the Nation address by the President, there is a key focus on growing industrialization, growing manufacturing. And so if you balance the two, that we have a growing population with the aging population of other developed countries, we will then have a good balance that can spur that actual economic growth. Then as far as health is concerned, South Africa is looking at a new national health system that's going to cater for the needs of even the poor, and ensuring that, and part of it is actually modeled around the UK model. So I think we're probably going to be the first country within Africa that's going to look at the health reform in a holistic point of view. And Renee, you were talking about our colleagues having mentioned collaboration between the different players in the economy. In South Africa, the strong emphasis right now is collaboration between business, collaboration between government, the academia, and labor. So every solution to South Africa's economic problems is going to lie on solutions that are going to come from those four, if I may call them stakeholders, to the growth of South Africa's economy. And just tapping on to what Sharon was saying, I mean, we are in a mode, and I think John also referred to this, we are calling it the Tumamina period in South Africa. Tumamina means send me. And so we have South Africans now that are saying, send me. They're all lifting their hands and they want to be able to be to assist in terms of the growth of the country. And as I said in the beginning, we're saying that one does not need to be in South Africa to assist in its growth and its development. South Africans can be outside and still play a role.
So let's touch a little bit on the difficult area of politics. We say collaboration is key to the future. It's the most divided politics one can find. The present has a job and a half. Elections are coming. It couldn't be more polarised. And it only got worse recently. Will it get better? Will there be a unified approach, or will it remain as polarised as it is today? Views?
Yeah, it is very polarised. I mean, I don't like to go on about it, but it is a very traumatised country. It has had a very traumatised past. And while one doesn't want to use that as an excuse for what's happening in the present, it is the reality. What happened under apartheid, and it's all come very much to the fore in the last few weeks and months since the death of Winnie Mandela, because Winnie Mandela was the most outspoken, most uncompromising, visible opponent of apartheid, to the point where she would hit or knock over any policeman that came too close to her. And in her, after her death, there's been an outpouring of support from South Africans, which some people find hard to understand because she had a dark side as well. But when somebody dies, people look at the positive side of their lives, and she was a remarkable resistance fighter throughout her life. And she was also, a side of her which a lot of people didn't know, she was also a very caring social worker, and reached out to a lot of people who were deeply touched. So, but what I'm saying is that that trauma has all come out in the wake of her death, and I think at the moment it's still churning and boiling. But I think, like a lot of things that churn and boil, you get something better afterwards, in that people are able to work through some of that hurt and pain and suffering that went on over many decades. And, you know, South Africa can't sort of say, look, just let us heal ourselves first and then we'll get on with the business. We've got to get on with the business and heal ourselves at the same time, no matter how difficult it is. And it's very difficult. And you know, people say that, yes, but what about other African countries? You know, in Namibia you had the genocide of the Hereros and so on and so forth. That's all true. But there is something uniquely traumatic and current and recent about what happened under apartheid in South Africa. So that's going to be with us for a long time.
Is it feasible or possible for a new leader to try to heal those divides and bring them together? Is it feasible? Even within his own party?
Yeah, you know, we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, right, which went quite a long way to giving some sort of agreed account of what had happened. Yes, it traumatized a lot of people, and a lot of the perpetrators, you know, sort of got off with amnesty and stuff, but it did give some sort of beginnings, and that process is still continuing. So, yes, a leader can make a huge difference. Mandela made a huge difference in relation to reconciliation and getting people, and showing that you can talk to anybody. You can find the goodness in anybody. You don't have to shun people because of A, B, or C. So, I mean, he made a tremendous start. The interesting thing about this president is that he's the first president who does not come from the exiled group of the ANC, which is a completely different mindset. He is from the inside. He's a successful businessman. He represents not one of the biggest tribes, the Xhosa or the Zulu. He represents one of the smallest tribes, the Venda. So these are all great pluses.
These are all indicators that things might be different.
Yes, and that it's a great sign of maturity, that you can have, you know, it's not like Kenya where you have a huge tribal outburst. We've managed to transcend and keep the sort of tribal differences subjected to.
John feels very positive about it. Graham, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to come to you, Shannon, Pumela. Can this leader, let's focus down, because it's the hell of a job, but he's brought a lot of initial hope. What's your view, Graham?
Yeah, I mean, you can see why, because the last one was so bloody awful. And I concur. I agree with John. I mean, this guy he is an unusual man, and he's very successful. I think that and again, I keep coming back to the odds and the numbers. They're stacked against him. I think one thing we talked about earlier, that I'm looking now for a new generation of African leaders that I guess are 20, 30 years younger than the generation that are now going out. And I meet them all the time. I've just been in Kenya for a week, and you're meeting young Africans who blow your mind. They're clever, and they've got that same positivity that John was talking about that you find in South Africa. You find it all over Africa. I kind of think that Cyril will probably provide a good holding operation. But that's not enough, as we said. The numbers are out of control. The economy's not performing well enough. Incidentally, I mean, I don't know what my fellow panelists think. Is corruption suddenly going to stop dead in its tracks now? Because it's cost the country, and again, more stats. I think it went from 2-3 years ago, it was something like, it was costing the country 30 or 40 billion a year, and it went up to 40 or 50, and it's now at 65 billion predicted for this year. That's cost. What corruption? Oh, by the way, identifiable corruption, which my business friends say is the tip of the iceberg. So God knows how much the whole corrupt infrastructure is costing the country. What is Cyril going to be able to do? I don't know the answer to that, because is he going to be able to take that out of the equation? Is he going to take government corruption out of the equation?
Highly unlikely that he's going to be able to cure it all. But hope can be powerful. And a strong leader can be powerful.
Fix an economy,
but a strong leader can.
Well, I don't think that Cyril Ramaphosa is Nelson Mandela. And by the way, John and I both, I covered that election and it was the most remarkable few days of my life. Having grown 94. Up in Africa, 94 was unbelievable. To be there is probably the greatest single memory I've got of Africa. So I'm lured by optimism, and then the numbers come and hit me in the face, and I walk away.
Pumela, rescue him from the numbers, please. Rescue this man from the numbers.
Okay, let's start here.
Not just words, not hope.
Graham has said that Cyril Ramaphosa is not Nelson Mandela. I think one thing we should appreciate is that the day Nelson Mandela came out of jail, and when he made that speech in Cape Town at the square, the person that was holding the microphone was Cyril Ramaphosa, our current president. And that signaled the beginning of probably a protégé relationship between the two of them. So we can safely say that we're in good hands, because this was a man who was next to Nelson Mandela in the negotiations towards our democracy, in the negotiations for the new dispensation or the new era. And I have hope, because the leader, I think Renee, you alluded to that a leader does set the tone. We have a new cultural shift within South Africa at the moment, where the culture of, for example, people first within government, we are back to what is called Batupili principles, which is about people first. But more than anything, if you look at the promises that this current president has made from the time he took office, he has delivered. He said, I'll launch the youth employment scheme. He launched it. He said that there will be a free education for households where the gross income is jointly about less than 350,000. That has been implemented. And then what he did, if you remember, before he went to Davos, he he expelled the board of one of the state-owned enterprises, which was Eskom, and that was the beginning of the cleansing from a corruption point of view to ensure that the board that is there now is ethical. And the new members of the board were the ones that then went to Davos. I think that was setting the tone because it was not even a month into the job. And then what we see is that in addition to that, he has laid a foundation to say, one, we are going to clean up SARS inside from an executive level so that it can be able to draw the taxes from the people.
So SARS is the internal revenue collection.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yes.
It is the internal revenue collection to say that let's clean it from inside first so that it can do its job of collecting taxes, which will feed into the fiscus efficiently. And then to speak about the corruption from an intervention point of view, a commission into the state capture has been set up and it will be led by the Deputy Chief Justice of the country. So there are tangibles that have been implemented in this less than 3 months.
So,
what percentage of South Africans pay tax?
We had it. You see, this is why SARS is
question. The answer is 6.
Okay, let's put it this way. We've had a phase. We had different phases from a tax collection point of view. We had a phase where people were just not interested in paying tax. Then we had a phase where during the time... They were not interested.
There's no one in this auditorium who's interested in paying tax, I can tell you.
I'm not interested.
We had a phase when they were not interested. We had a phase where they were rallied into being interested in paying tax because they were shown the benefits of paying tax in terms of what the benefits were to them and from a country point of view. So we had a phase where everyone was registering to pay tax. Then we went through a phase where people said, why should I? And now we are in a phase that says, let's clean it at the top so that we can be able to give people that hope that and the trust that they had in the system because they could see it trickling down into the benefits of the people, the social benefits.
So that's beautifully explained, beautifully explained. But I'm going to now draw a line now. I'm going to shut up, Graham. I'm going to draw a line because it's a beautiful line. We'll take a break here. We have the dilemma in South Africa where only 6% of the population pay taxes, but they've got the most advanced tax collection system you could ever imagine. Way in advance of what we do here, way in advance of most parts, way in advance of... This is the dilemma. There's some things in South Africa which work beyond belief.
And one of those is the corporate governance.
Yes.
It has one of the strongest corporate governance code, or the strongest corporate governance code in the world. Not the most adhered to, not the best policed. It's ironic, but the amount of work that has gone into that at a corporate level and at a governance level, and you combine that with a commercial leader setting the right tone from the top, I think you can move mountains.
So this is what we're setting up for our second part. We're going to take a break, we're going to have some drinks, but I want to refuel my audience. So here's what I've heard. I've heard, if we look at the numbers only, doesn't sound that great. If we look at the causes for optimism, there are real tangibles there. But when we start to mix the whole thing up, it becomes very complex, very difficult, and it's easy to be pessimistic. It's far harder to be optimistic. But as the Inspired Leaders Network states, leaders can do some magnificent things. When the others say it can't be done, we get the leaders in. And South Africa is a great beacon. In 1994, who would have predicted, as difficult as it is today, it's so much better than many of the pundits thought it was going to be. So let's have a drink, and when we come back, I'm going to come to take your questions. They're a broad church, they're learned, there's nothing you can't ask them. Give them a big round of applause for me, please. If I can have you back in 20 minutes, please. Drinks are served. If I have you back in 20 minutes.
Thank you.